the Morgan Foundation, we see it as something we want to fund locally, but we also see, and hope you see, that in our community and in our country, mental health has been drastically underfunded and unnoticed and uncared for. And I think, when you think about the name of the Silent Samaritan Society, it comes from that famous passage of the Good Samaritan that's found in the Gospel of Luke. And the reason that Jesus told that parable was in answer to the question, who is my neighbor? And so when he's asked, who is my neighbor, Jesus tells this famous story that we call the Good Samaritan. And there are a lot of ways to treat it. I preached on it many times, and I'm sure Charles has too, and there are different ways to emphasize it. But the nice thing about these type of really, really good stories and deep stories is that they're very full of meaning, and you can see one thing one year and see another thing another year, and something has leapt out to me this year that I hadn't seen before. But just to retell it, Jesus said a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and when he was attacked by robbers, they stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of you think this was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And when I've done that in a Bible study before and preached on it before, I've always emphasized that the people you would expect to help, the priest and the Levite who was an expert in the law, they went over to the other side. And then here's this Samaritan who's from an underclass, not the proper Jewish person, and he becomes the one that's kind of the kicker of the story. He becomes the one who renders aid and becomes the neighbor. And that's a good way to look at it. But this time what jumped out at me is this one little thing that's been there forever. He said the next day he took out 2 denarii, which are coins, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after him. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. And what that says to me is that healing has a cost. Healing has an expense. And part of what that Good Samaritan did was he paid for the healing to happen. And that's what I think we need to be about in our dealings with mental health in Scotland County, and specifically Scotland Family Counseling Center. Silent Samaritan Society needs to be about handing those denarii over, about paying the expense of that healing that needs to be done. And you've got great people to do it. You've got really, really dedicated, faithful, theologically informed, compassionate people who have been trained, and you've got a government who is underserving and cutting back on mental health services. We have to be the ones that step into the gap. So what I hope from this day and from your involvement, that you will join us with the Morgan Foundation and help support the Scotland Family Counseling Center, help endow these programs so that they continue, because nobody else is going to do it. It's got to be us. And just as we've seen from Scripture, healing has a cost, and the Good Samaritans pay the cost.